I simply couldn't bring myself to put makeup on. We're lucky I got dressed and did my hair to some extent, which, holy cow, I got it trimmed 2 weeks ago and I feel like it's already really unruly. So I hope you enjoyed the look. Today I am following my Jenny Han train with To All the Boys I've Loved Before, which, just like her Summer I Turned Pretty series, has this time it's a movie counterpart versus a Netflix show counterpart, which this is on Netflix too. Actually, is that one on Hulu? It doesn't matter. The point is, this one does have a movie counterpart. And I have seen all 3 movies, and I liked them. Unlike the Summer I Turned Pretty series, I thought, even though there were a lot of changes that were made, I liked the portrayal. I think my favorite part about this series is the fact that her characters are Asian, just like she is. I feel like this series stepped things up a notch in a way that the Summer I Turned Pretty didn't, starting with the fact that she was able to use diverse characters. I feel like this is something that we're trying to trend towards within the writing community, is showing the diversity. And back when she wrote the Summer I Turned Pretty, I don't think she felt that to be successful, she could have characters that reflected herself, whereas I'm guessing that with the success of that series, she was given a little bit more leeway, and so she was able to have a Korean main character. And I enjoyed this because this is the first time I'd ever been exposed to Korean barbecue, and I was just like, I have no idea what that is, but it sounds amazing. I enjoyed all the cultural references. I felt like they went to make Lara Jean a more dynamic character. She was far more interesting than just some white girl with a crush on a boy. I also felt like the issues that I had with the Summer I Turned Pretty were opened up, but then delved into here the way that I wish they'd been there. It's definitely a series for teenagers. This one, I thought, was a series for teenagers that adults could also appreciate, because her characters were not so one-dimensional. Lara Jean, there were moments where I thought she was very weak. Like, I needed her to have a little bit more of a backbone, or I needed her to not sit back so much or not be so perfect and goody-goody. But then she would have these other moments where I was like, that is exactly what I'm wanting, and that's exactly what I was hoping would happen with Belly in the Summer I Turned Pretty, but she never quite managed to do. If you are unfamiliar with this series, Lara Jean Song Covey is one of 3 song girls. Her older sister is Margot, her younger sister is Kitty. Lara Jean, when she has a crush on a boy, or basically when she feels like she's in love with a boy, the way that she gets over her love is to write them basically a Dear John letter. And so she has this hat box full of Dear John letters to a handful of boys from over the years. She is 16 now. Her summer is ending. She has just gotten her license. Margot has gone off to school in Scotland, and now her mother has passed away due to basically a brain hemorrhage. She had an incident where she hit her head. Everything seemed to be fine, and then turned out everything was not fine. Margot stepped in, became the mother of the family. Once Margot goes to Scotland, Lara Jean is now that mother figure and has to step into that role. Margot had a boyfriend named Josh. Josh had been best friends with Lara Jean and Margot, and to some extent Kitty. He is the boy next door. Lara Jean at some point had a crush on him. And then all of a sudden he starts liking Margot, and then he and Margot start dating. So she writes a Dear John letter to Josh. Josh has come over to the house. He's hanging out with Lara Jean and Kitty. Kitty wants a puppy. She is dead set on getting an Akita. And so Lara Jean starts teasing her, saying, well, I know what you would name this dog. Kitty, also having to some extent a crush on Josh, was going to name this dog Josh. Kitty, upset with Lara Jean, and here's a spoiler, grabs this hat box and well, first she reads all the letters and then she mails them out. Thus, To All the Boys I've Loved Before, where Lara Jean's world turns upside down because Josh has gotten his letter and she's like, how do I save face? She starts fake dating this boy named Peter Kavinsky. Peter was one of her friends during childhood, along with another girl named Genevieve. At some point, they all went their separate ways, except for Peter and Genevieve, who started dating. Genevieve is now a mean girl. She and Peter are ultra popular, and Lara Jean, I guess, is not popular, but then she's not popular. She basically only has 3 friends, Margot, Josh, and then this girl named Chris, who's actually Genevieve's cousin. I never understood why Lara Jean was friends with Chris, because Lara Jean is a goody-goody. Chris is a wild child who does things with boys, and she smokes and she drinks, and she is not someone you would expect Lara Jean to be best friends with. Han does try to explain away, oh hey, I know that we don't make sense, but we just do. It doesn't satisfy me, especially because we don't see enough of Chris to get an explanation, to see how they get on. It's basically anytime we see Chris is coming after Lara Jean for decisions she's making. They're like oil and water. I do not understand why they're best friends. But Lara Jean, so this is one thing that really bothered me at first, and let me preface this and say, I couldn't stand Margot. I could not stand Kitty. And in some ways, it was in the best sort of ways. Like, in all the ways that I felt the characters in The Summer I Turned Pretty were one-dimensional and flat, are the ways that these characters are actual people. Therefore, I don't like them because they have character flaws. While I will go on and talk about how much I don't like these people, it's not the writing. Like, it's good writing, which is why I don't like these people. Just like with Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, that is my least favorite book, but because she did such a good job at portraying Harry as an angsty teenager. I do think Margot could have used a little bit more, because Margot, she has her nose so high up in the air, and she feels like all these decisions that Lara Jean makes are inappropriate decisions, and it's just like, but I don't know who Margot is. Like, we're supposed to love her at first, but then she judges everything that Lara Jean is doing, and I'm like, so now I hate her, but she felt like a stereotype to some extent. We get to know her better in the second book, but for this book, I did think we needed a little bit more of her. And then with Kitty, as I've already spoiled it, like the fact that we have this entire book that we do not know who sent those letters, and we're supposed to like Kitty, I just couldn't. And so I thought she was really annoying, and that was one of the things that I hated about Lara Jean's personality, is how she babies Kitty. Margot is 18, Lara Jean is 16, Kitty is 10. So there is a large age gap, and in many ways she is the baby, but I didn't like how they babied her, how she got away with everything, and how she was supposed to be cute, but to me it was annoying because she's 10 years old, she's not 6. And on top of that, when she reveals to Lara Jean that she's the reason that all these letters went out, Lara Jean's like, just lets it slide. And I wanted consequences for Kitty, because I feel like Kitty is that bratty kid who gets away with everything because she is the baby of the family. Where was I? I remember where I was. So the book opens with Margot going off, and now Lara Jean has to drive herself places. And one thing I really disliked about Lara Jean was like her insecurity. I loved her insecurities because it made her more real, but at the same time I was like, dude, just suck it up and drive the car. It's not that hard. She makes a really, really big deal about how she is so afraid to drive. And I'm like, you live in small town USA where probably the highest speed limit is 45. Not that big of a deal. She is meeting Chris at the mall when she ends up getting into an accident because somehow she missed a stop sign and was T-boned, I think. His car is fine, hers is not. He leaves, and then she's sitting there freaking out. She calls Josh, and Josh is like, have you called AAA? She's like, no, I haven't called AAA. And I'm like, oh my gosh, Lara Jean, you're such a baby. So we have this whole thing. She's waiting for Josh, and Peter Kavinsky pulls up. He's like, hey, do you need some help? And she's like, no, I'm fine. He's like, have you called AAA? She's like, no, should I have called? And it's just, ugh. Anyways, they haven't really had much interaction before this because they've gone their separate ways. He goes off. Josh comes. Things get sorted out, but now she's in a bind because she doesn't have a car. Word gets around that Peter and Genevieve have broken up. Genevieve, as I said, is the quintessential mean girl. The last time that they'd broken up, he tried to date somebody else. She blacklisted this girl. She spread rumors and did things to the point that this girl left school. Now, Lara Jean is in a bind because her letters have been sent out, and even though she thought she had gotten over Josh because of her letter, now that Margot is out of the picture and her letter has been sent, she realizes, oh my gosh, I'm not over Josh. He comes to her at school and he's like, hey, I got this letter. Before I go any further, my thought here is, if she wrote this letter, if she's 16 now and she wrote this letter when she was 14-ish, except for the fact that she's a really sensitive, thoughtful person who can get embarrassed easily, I don't understand why she has such an issue saying, oh, I had a crush on you 2 years ago. It happens, guys. We have crushes. They go away. 2 years later, except for the fact that she is recognizing that she's not over him, I don't understand why she can't just own up to the fact that, yes, I wrote you a letter because I did have a crush on you. And then you started dating my sister, and this is what I did to get over you. I don't understand it whatsoever, but she cannot fess up to any of this to him. So now we have Peter Kavinsky walking down the hallway, and she's like, oh, I did write that letter, but like, I'm totally over you, and I'm actually dating somebody. Who are you dating? Oh, him! She runs across the hallway, tackles, like jumps on Peter, and just kisses him. Except for the fact that this is the impetus, this is the key event for the book, I don't understand why she does this. Like, it's so out of character for her. He's like, what in the world is going on here? And she's like, oh, that's great. I love you. It's so glad we're together. To continue to save face, they come up with a pact. They start to fake date, and they come up with a contract that's like, here are all the things that we will and we won't do. And they continue on their merry way. The entire book, we are waiting for Genevieve to pull her stunts, to humiliate Lara Jean, because that's what she does. Because even though she broke up with Peter to date somebody else, Peter belongs to her. I could have used more of Genevieve as well. Again, she felt very stereotypical mean girl. Han did a great job with her. And it's been a minute since I've read these books. I have a very vague impression that we do get an explanation down the line because there's 2 more books following this one. But again, for this book, I needed background for her. We get a little bit at the end of the book, but I wanted more of Genevieve than just Genevieve is the main antagonist, and so she's gonna be mean because she's supposed to be mean. Obviously, over the course of the novel, Lara Jean and Peter start to fall for each other, and I loved their romance. It was so easy and enjoyable because there was no pressure to actually be together. But then you would see the little things, their reactions that would clue us into the fact that their feelings have become real. And now we're just waiting for that moment when they can admit it to each other. However, this whole time, Josh doesn't like Peter. Peter doesn't like Josh. I think it's very interesting. Han explores a lot of subject matters in a very delicate and thoughtful way. One is sexuality in teenagers. The other is relationships, be it romantic or platonic. And I think it's very interesting how Josh is Lara Jean's best friend. But then we have Peter, who is like, Josh is such a jerk. He's such a douche. And here's my perspective on it. Like, cause we like Josh. And then Peter's like, he turned me in the 7th grade for cheating. And we're just like, but did you cheat? Or actually, Lara Jean was like, did you cheat? And he's like, yeah, but that's not the point. And so now we're looking at Peter like, just like Lara Jean is like, you should care. Cheating, you shouldn't cheat. But at the same time, we're like, dude, Josh, whatever Peter's doing was none of your business. So now we're like, why is Lara Jean friends with Josh if he's such a douche? Because now we actually like Peter. Josh, again, like, it's 3-4 years later, and when Margot learns that she is dating Peter, she's like, well, did you know that Josh turned him in for cheating in the 7th grade? And it's just like, how petty can we be? How long ago was this? So I do like the way that Han twists relationships and makes you think, I did like him. And he did make sense. But now he doesn't make sense because this person makes sense. And then again, we're getting this look at Margot as she's really controlling and she's not that great of a person. But we're supposed to think she's a great person because she's Margot. Peter, this whole time, is very suspicious of Josh because he's like, well, Josh likes you. Josh, at the same time, is so worried about losing his friendship with the Song Girls, or at least with Lara Jean and Kitty, because of his breakup with Margot. And so he's just like, why can't we be friends? And she's like, but we are, because she eventually realizes she doesn't like him anymore. And she's like, I'm not ignoring you. And of course they have their whole thing of, why are you ignoring me? And she's like, well, I was ignoring you, but not for the same reason that you thought I wasn't ignoring you because you and Margot broke up. I was ignoring you because I liked you and I didn't want you to know it. We get to a moment where Josh confronts her. He kisses her. Somehow I missed this part. She tells Peter and he's like, well, I knew it. Christmas comes around and Margot returns home. She is obviously upset by the fact that they have done things without her, which again, I like, because Margot is so stuck up in many ways, very self-righteous, and we don't get much of her. What we do see is, well, she's happy to be gone. She doesn't miss her family. And now she comes back and we have these two sides of, wow, I feel really bad for Margot because like they put the Christmas tree up without her. They did their Christmas cookies without her. But also, like, why does she have to act so put out? Like, they had valid reasons for having to do things before she came home. So why does it matter so much to her? We've already learned that she and Josh had slept together. This kind of like throws Lara Jean for a loop because Chris puts it out there. She's like, or maybe it was Peter. One of them puts it out there that, of course, those two had already slept together. Lara Jean's like, they never would have slept together because she and I made a pact. Now, we weren't going to do it until we were in love, and if we did do it, we were going to tell each other, and since Margot never told her. And so this is another thing that I just didn't understand, because I didn't know Margot very well. I didn't understand why, if she and Lara Jean have such a close relationship, why she wouldn't come to Lara Jean, except for the fact that, like, that's awkward. At which she admits when Lara Jean tries to talk to her about it, she's like, I can't talk about this with you. So it's like, I do get it on a human level, but I don't get it because it's not really explained in the writing. She comes home, things are a little dicey. Peter has convinced Lara Jean to go on the school ski trip, which, can I say, at what point is a ski trip only one day? Okay? For me, any like church outing or anything was always a weekend, like a couple of days. But I guess for their school, their ski trip only lasted one day. She has already come to him saying, look, we have fulfilled the terms of the pact. I'm over Josh. We have successfully made Genevieve jealous. And so, yeah, let's break up. But he's like, but you promised to go on the ski trip. Now she is like, well, what do I do? She convinces Chris to come. And then she sits with Chris on the school bus. And this makes Peter very, very upset. And she's like, I don't understand why you're upset. He's like, because if you're my girlfriend, we're supposed to sit together. And she's like, but we're not dating, and we're actually supposed to be breaking up. They sort of resolve things. But it becomes very clear that Peter is still upset with her because he essentially ignores her the entire one day of the ski trip. However, then she gets invited to go to the hot tub. And the hot tub is notorious for couples hooking up. And she's like, I'm not that kind of girl. But she decides, I'm gonna go and I'm going to apologize to Peter. So she goes, and he's obviously surprised. He sees her, but then it's kind of like he checks to see if there's other people around. They end up making out in the hot tub because he has already told her that, because let me backtrack. Before the hot tub invite, they hash things out because she's like, I don't understand why you're upset with me. He admits to her his feelings, to which she does not reciprocate. She does, but she doesn't to him. So then she goes and she tells him, look, I'm just scared. You know, this is all very new to me, but I do like you. They end up making out in the hot tub. The next day, things are all well and good until they get to the rest stop, which, can I say, I told you, it was a one-day ski trip. They woke up at like the crack of dawn to come home. So they get to this rest stop for lunch or something. I'm like, I don't understand this schedule. This time frame does not make sense to me, because I would think, all right, so we leave 8 or 9 in the morning to get there. We stay there a couple of days, and then we leave at probably 8, 9, 10 on the day we leave. And it just cracks me up, the fact that it wasn't even lunch, it could have been breakfast. Like, they left so early. It doesn't make sense to me. I do not understand Han's time frame. She goes to the bathroom where she encounters Genevieve. Genevieve reveals that she knows that Lara Jean and Peter had sex in the hot tub, and Lara Jean's like, no, we didn't. And she gets back on the bus, and she is super upset, will not sit with Peter because she believes that Peter is telling people this is what they've done. So she is with Chris. Peter gets upset with her because he's like, why would I have done this? Why won't you talk to me? Why won't you sit with me? Then Lara Jean sees Genevieve telling every single person about what happened in the hot tub, or what didn't happen in the hot tub. We are now wondering, did Peter tell his friends, or didn't he tell his friends? And she's rightly very upset. And for me, I loved the way that she stood up for herself, in the way that Belly in The Summer I Turned Pretty never did. I liked that she was like, look, this is what I've heard you're saying, this is how I feel, and I do not like it. I do wish that Han had addressed, which this book was written in the early 2000s, so I can understand why it wasn't really pushed. But I wish that Han had further addressed why it was so important to Lara Jean to have Peter stand up for her. If this is something that is upsetting to her because of her reputation, because this is just not how she wants to be seen, I think that should be valid and validated. And I wish that point had been impressed on Peter, that, okay, it's really not, I mean, yes, it is the fact that you might be telling people something that's not true, but like, I have a reputation and I want you to respect me, and I want you to see things from my point of view. It's not necessarily about you. You are the guy who gets pats on the back. I'm the one who gets shunned. And so I really wished that Lara Jean would be like, look, this is the heart of my issue. I want you to stand up for me. I want you to respect me and to understand my feelings. Anyway, she's very upset. She and Margot have come to blows because they have a party at their house, which Kitty and Margot invite Peter to. Peter shows up. Josh and Lara Jean have a scene in the kitchen, at which point Margot learns that Josh had kissed Lara Jean. Now there is a video of what happened in the hot tub, which I could not believe they let Kitty watch. This is one of those things, like, Chris tells Lara Jean, hey, you need to go watch this video on Instagram. And she's in her room with Kitty, and so now she's like, oh, Kitty, just close your eyes. And Kitty, because nobody ever tells her no or punishes her, is like, well, I'm gonna watch it anyways. And I'm like, dude, she's 10? What's happening in this hot tub does not look like what's actually happening in this hot tub. And then, of course, Kitty is like, oh, well, I've seen worse on HBO. Of course, Margot, being the voice of reason, is like, well, why are you watching that anyways? But I missed a part where Lara Jean and Margot come to blows because Margot will not speak to Lara Jean after learning that Josh kissed her. After learning about this whole thing with, I got ahead of myself. Sorry, that's the problem when I get into the second book. Kitty hasn't seen the thing on Instagram yet, but Margot has. And Margot tells their dad. So now we have Margot being all high and mighty about, well, look, this is what I've done, but you're not allowed to do anything, and now I'm going to tell our dad. And then, of course, the dad doesn't believe Lara Jean when she's like, nothing happened. She and Margot come to blows. I really wish she would have put Margot in her place a little bit more, but this is one of those character flaws of hers that I don't care for, where it's kind of like Margot makes a point and Lara Jean's like, oh, okay, well, if you put it that way, I'm just going to accept it and move on. Well, it's great in some ways because we do need to let things roll off our backs, but on other ways, I want Lara Jean to stand up for herself just a little bit more, largely when it concerns her sisters and her family. She just accepted what they wanted rather than having her own personality. Everybody's fine and hunky-dory. They celebrate New Year's, and Lara Jean has written a letter to Peter because she's not over him. It's not a Dear John letter. It is a, hey, I would love for us to get back together letter. She goes to his house. He answers the door like he could care less. And of course, I'm all riled up. I'm like, no, Peter, you don't get to act this way to Lara Jean. She loses her nerve because she's like, well, I guess he doesn't feel the same way that I feel. So she's like, oh, I just came to say I'm sorry and like, hope we can be friends. See you later, alligator. He notices the letter in her pocket. He teased her about these letters throughout the novel, but at the same time, I'm like, why would he notice the letter in her pocket? I don't know. And then why? I mean, except for the fact that she lies to him about it and says she had found the letter at his mailbox and she would just throw it away. Why would he care about this letter enough to say, well, that's my letter, like I need to have it, give it to me? They struggle over the letter. He gets the letter. He reads it. He admits to her, or he asks her, he's like, why wouldn't you give this to me? Or why wouldn't you tell me these things? And she's like, well, because of the way you acted. He's like, oh, it's plain hard to get. So now Peter's forgiven in my eyes. I'm like, oh, Peter, you're such a sweetheart. Even though he's not, but he is. I enjoyed Peter because he, in many ways, was that stereotypical popular jock. But on the same token, he was very human. He was humanized by Han. I enjoyed that he was a thoughtful person. He, in many ways, was a sensitive person. He was a very fun person. I enjoyed Peter Kay, and I liked him and Lara Jean together, pretend or not pretend. She goes home and learns that Margot had tried to talk to Josh because she realized she didn't want to be broken up, but Josh told her he didn't want to get back together. So Lara Jean has her happy ending. Margot does not have her happy ending. But then, the book ends with where it ends, and we pick up with P.S. I love you. 100% recommend. I'll be back tomorrow with P.S. I love you. Let me know what you think of this book, and I'll see you later. Bye.